Let's move away from lies and fears.
Perhaps it's time to leave.
Free from how you look or what they say. Like a lion runs wild through the wilderness. Free from showing off a living fate. Like the eagles flying high, dancing with the air. There's breath in your lungs to breathe. Say, God, take this mask away. You see, he won't let you stay. Living in hollow days.
Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Shattercast. Today we're going to be talking about some of the biggest games of 2018. We're going to be talking about Red Dead Redemption 2, which online a lot of people are saying RDR2, which for some reason I always read as R2D2, and I'm really confused why they're talking about Star Wars. Anyway, probably just me. We're also going to be talking about Spider-Man on the PS4, personally my favorite game of 2018. And last but not least, the critically acclaimed, widely loved, Game of the Year award-winning Fallout 76.
No.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Splatoon.
God of War? I didn't know where you're going with this.
I think Game of the Year actually...
I think God of War got for some of them.
Yeah, I think it was, yeah.
But we're not talking about that one, are we?
I just want to say, for those of you who watched the awards, when was it a guy from Blizzard who came in and gave the award for Game of the Year?
Oh, I don't know.
I can't remember who it was. He's a legend though, because when he walked up to the mic with the envelope, he said, "Lottie Dottie, who gets the Gotti?"
Oh.
And that just made me really happy. It made me laugh. Again, I was probably the only one. But Red Dead Redemption 2. It was a game I was pretty hyped for. It was a Rockstar game, open world, Western. I was really, really hoping that they would steer away from what I felt was the biggest problem with the first game, and that is you put redemption in the title of your game, and then at the end of the game, you kill the main character for all of the mistakes that he made. And it's like, why would you even talk about redemption and have your character go on this massive redemption story and then kill him off in the end, basically saying, hey, guess what? You can't actually redeem yourself for all of the mistakes you made. I never wanted to play that game again. And so when I did play through it, because I'm a bit of a completionist and I wanted to do everything, I just would never do the last mission. And so I just refused to accept their crappy ending to the first game.
How do you really feel about this game, John?
I could spend the entire segment talking about it, but I won't.
But we won't.
All I'll say is I wanted Red Dead 2 to sort of veer away from that sort of depressing story arc. And while I won't say how the game ends, it definitely follows in similar footsteps of, hey, we're going to really make this game as depressing as possible once you get into like the second act. Hannah, Derrick, do either of you have anything that you want to add about that game?
Well, I think part of what makes Red Dead 2 depressing isn't really just the story, but the mundane aspect of it, like having to rest, having to shave, having to stay clean, like the everyday stuff that I think a lot of people try to escape when they play a video game.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the crossover market is for Red Dead Redemption 2 and The Sims, but it does seem like they
Usually you wouldn't think those two go together.
Yeah, no, it does seem like they drew a lot of the let's add these, like, who doesn't want to bathe
it'd be different.
in these games?
It would be different if Red Dead 2 was lighthearted, because then you probably wouldn't mind the everyday stuff.
It would seem more of a quirky additive, like, oh, I gotta shave or something. It's like, oh, that's
silly. But you
silly.
actually get penalized if you don't shave.
Yeah.
So,
interesting. Glad that doesn't happen in real life. But that was Hannah. That's a great point. I was thinking, what do we want as gamers? Because a lot of us want open world and all these games where you can do crazy stuff. And do we want a simulator or do we want a game? Like, how much do we want people to gamify these things? And I think from what I hear, a lot of people thought those portions were very slow and, like you said, very mundane and probably not the best parts of the game. So
an open world game that doesn't have any of those negatives, isn't depressing, and has a fantastic story?
What, John?
Let me think about it. Spider-Man.
What?
Okay, here's the thing. I haven't enjoyed, and this is I want you to know that you can trust how much I love Spider-Man. I have not enjoyed a Spider-Man game since the Nintendo 64.
It's been a long time.
A lot of them have just legitimately sucked. The one that came out 2 or 3 years ago, okay, in my opinion, there were people who loved them. It's fine. enjoying entertainment is subjective, and I recognize that.
Wait, the Nintendo 64? I thought it was PlayStation.
That's a good point. It might have been the PlayStation 1, but within a year or two of each other.
Yeah, the same timeline.
Same time of reference here. The one that came out around the same time as is it Andrew Garfield? Who played in The Amazing Spider-Man?
He's the second one.
Yeah, he was the second one. So the game that came out around that time on the PS3 or 4 or something, like it made me sick to my stomach playing it. It was really, like, the controls were really jerky. Whereas in this Spider-Man game, you know, everyone is kind of teasing IGN because in the first line of their review, they talked about it made you feel like Spider-Man, and they repeated that like 17 times in their review. But then I played the game, and guess what?
Makes you feel like Spider-Man?
I feel like Spider-Man.
What?
I know I've said this before, but this game is amazing. I loved every second of it. Derrick, you love the Spider-Man character. I don't think you've played this game yet.
I didn't get a chance to play it yet, but I love all that I'm hearing about it, and I love the fact that they wanted to also feature Spider-Man, all of his powers, and the way they do that I hear is amazing, but also feature Peter Parker and just his storyline. And I think one of the best things about Spider-Man and why a lot of people like the character is they can relate to Peter Parker, just this ordinary person who isn't super suave or anything and is just trying to get through life, who has these amazing powers. And so to hear that they've been doing that so well, tons of people like it. I can't wait to play the game. So good job on you guys for making a really awesome game.
One of the things that I look for in a video game is story and artwork, and really it matters less to me, like, the fight, because I'm just trying to do what the game tells me to do, as long as it's still fun. It's still important to me, but it's not, like, up there as much as I think the story or even, like, the feel of the game, like the atmosphere that the game sets, like the lightheartedness that we just mentioned. But one thing I liked about Spider-Man was the fighting, like some of the cool moves that you create, some of the evolution of the way that he fights and how you, like, create new things and spin bad guys around, and it just kind of wows you as you're entering into more difficult fights, some of the things that you end up doing, whether it's purposeful or by accident.
Well, yeah, that's one of the things that they did really well in the game was Spider-Man uses his environment to his advantage. And in the game, there are several ways that you're afforded the opportunity to do that.
Kind of Jackie Chan-like.
Very much Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan has always been that. Whenever you see one of his movies, he's always, like, using his environment. So the game succeeds in the same way that the most recent iteration of Spider-Man in movies, between Homecoming and Infinity War and Civil War, where they've succeeded. And it's exactly what you said. They got Peter Parker right.
Yes,
it's not
finally.
hard to get Spider-Man right. It is hard to get Peter Parker right.
Good job, Tom Holland. Way to
Right,
go,
Tom
Marvel.
Holland nailed it. He's continuing to nail it, and this game did it as well. And the voice actor they have, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. He did a fantastic job. He's a prolific actor, has done a lot of games, but they made a great casting decision with that as well. But now for the main event,
Boom, boom, boom.
ladies and gentlemen, Fallout. That silence that you're hearing right now,
It's the hype.
Tons of fans who are
because there
upset
is no hype.
with this game.
I was really excited when they announced a new Fallout game, and then I was immediately cautious when they announced it was going to be online, multiplayer, no NPCs, because it really felt like they were going the same route as Elder Scrolls Online, which, if you're familiar with the Elder Scrolls series, you have Morrowind, Oblivion, you have Skyrim, these amazing games, and then you make Elder Scrolls Online, and it feels like a watered-down version. And I think that now that we've had Fallout 76 for a couple months, people are feeling the same way. It's a watered-down version of the Fallout universe that they love.
Well, what really surprised me about it being an only online thing, because at first I thought there was a campaign, like a story, like with most Fallout games, every other Fallout game, pretty much, is the concept of the timeline, like the fact that you're the first to leave your vault, and just sort of like how this is a prequel in a sense to the other Fallouts, and that makes a great basis for a story, yet they didn't run with it.
Yeah, and I think in past Fallouts, people have wanted options to play with other people, and they experiment with it a little bit. So on paper, this sounds like an interesting idea, maybe, but just execution hasn't been that good. And just even out of game, just different things keep happening. For example, there's the whole collector's edition where they said they're going to have these canvas bags.
It wasn't canvas.
It wasn't canvas. It was like this nylon material.
Yeah, it was like, we're going to send out canvas bags.
And it's not.
Then it's not canvas.
And then Bethesda, after some, concern from fans, they give fans in-game credit. You couldn't even buy a game or a bag in-game with the amount of credit they gave you. And so it's like, what are you doing, Bethesda? So finally, I think they're going and starting to ship the actual canvas bags. But it's just like one thing after the other with this game that bugs are not bugs in the game. The game's not working the way it should. So it seems to be getting really bad reviews. Not a lot of people are happy with it. So I'm kind of curious what Bethesda will do to kind of turn this around.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Fallout series. The first one, I didn't start at the beginning. The first one I ever played was New Vegas, and I went back and played some older ones, and I really enjoyed 4. But that being said, even though they've spent all this time building up a rapport with their audience, doing a great job making all of these games, it really feels like Fallout 76 has been blunder after blunder after blunder, and not just people being dissatisfied with the game, but what you said, like their customer service, they're not following through on promises that they make with the canvas bag and then having to eventually send out more. Like, do they realize the amount of money that they wasted by now that they've had to send 2 bags to everybody and they still have to go back and do the canvas one? It's hurt them financially, and it's greatly hurt their reputation. Very strongly hurt their reputation, which is unfortunate because they've spent so long making great games, and then it almost seems like in one game they've turned a lot of gamers against them. Yeah. Because they've failed so consistently with this game.
And I hear a lot of people say, Bethesda's games have always had things like bugs, but the story was so good that people were willing to overlook that and still enjoy the game. Again, as Hannah, as you were saying, with the lack of story in this, and all the things added up, it's like people are tired of kind of giving Bethesda a pass, and they're kind of starting to hold them accountable now.
Yeah, we saw the same thing with the Assassin's Creed series. They had several good games in a row, and then the games were getting shipped more and more often with more and more glitches that took longer and longer to patch. And eventually people got fed up with it. And I think the most recent one is Odyssey.
Yes.
I think it's Odyssey, and it's getting a lot of good reviews. It way better than Unity. Unity basically tanked almost as hard as 76 did. But maybe Bethesda's going to pull around. Maybe the next game they release is going to be their Odyssey. Maybe it will be.
We can only hope.
We can only hope. But again, their reputation has been marred, right? And so what can we learn from that mistake? And as Christians, our reputation at times gets called into question. There was a time in the United States when being a pastor was something prestigious, it was honorable, and a lot of people in society looked up to you. Eventually, it kind of became a joke, and especially with certain denominations and accusations that have flown around, it can almost be seen as a negative. You tell people you're a pastor, and they take a step back. And so how would you say we as Christians can learn from the mistakes that Bethesda has made with regards to the reputation, and to what extent should we be even concerned with our reputation?
My thoughts are, I think it depends on how you define reputation, which way you're looking at it. If you're talking about reputation being popularity, are you well liked? I think as Christians, we may not always be well liked. Jesus himself said that when you follow me, a lot of times the stances you might take, the path you might go will be unpopular. But to take heart, because that's exactly what Jesus faced. So if we're talking about reputation as far as popularity, as Christians, I don't think that should be our main goal, because then we're chasing fame, and we're chasing things that aren't as important. When we take a look at reputation as far as things like integrity, then it's hugely important. Bethesda has lost some of their integrity, not just because of the original problems, how they've responded.
Yeah.
I think as Christians, we have to be very careful about our integrity. If we say yes to something or we say no to something, we should follow through with our word. If we don't, we should apologize. People should be able to trust us as people. And also, we need to realize that we represent just not ourselves. If we call ourselves a Christian, we represent God. So often the way that people see God is how they interact with us. And so if we do things to harm our integrity, I think we hurt ourselves. A lot of times, I think also, as Christians, sometimes we can, in a way, pretend to be more righteous than sometimes we are. I think if we're struggling with something, we need to learn to be honest. Yeah, I'm struggling with this issue, where it might be lust or dealing with an addiction or whatever, because then I think people can relate to us more and we come off less hypocritical. And I think people can learn and grow from that.
Yeah.
I think especially modern, well, really, if you look back at history, it's not just modern day, but people get wrapped up in their reputation. And when you think about it within the Christian community, the reputation of being completely pure, being completely honest all the time, sin-free, basically, those are things that are good things to strive for. I agree with you in that. I agree that we should be aware that we are representing Christ and we definitely want to reflect Christ. But I think also Christians especially tend to get too wrapped up in their reputation, and they need to be more concerned with their identity, because when they realize that their identity is in Christ and they rely on Christ, they realize that there's grace. And then also when we're walking in the Spirit, when we're walking with God and following the guidance of the Holy Spirit, there's the fruits of the Spirit. There's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, all those things that we are talking about. I'm a children's pastor, so I got it memorized, got it down. But, you're just talking about those are all things that you want to reflect when you're representing God, but also realizing that if you're walking with God, those things are going to come out of you when you're focused on your identity in Christ and less focused on how people perceive you.
Yeah, and those things are going to be noticed by people. And so while I agree with your last point that we don't need to be concerned with what other people think about us, perception is reality for society, for culture. And if we are living with integrity, like you said, like Bethesda lost some of their integrity, the Bible calls us to live above reproach, because God recognizes that we are his witnesses on earth. And some of us are bad witnesses. Some of us lack integrity. Some of us aren't living above reproach. And so if perception is reality, then we need to not just not do bad things and not just do good things, but both. We need to be intentional about doing good things, and we need to be intentional about combating bad things. We need to be a force for good is not just to talk openly about the great things of God, the things that are good and pure, but it's also to take a stand against the things that aren't, to fight injustice whenever it rears its ugly head. You see a lot of times where in World War II, there were examples of Christians and Catholics and other religious groups and families who would harbor Jews from the Nazis. It wasn't enough to say that it's that genocide is bad or that racism is bad or that the Nazis are wrong. It's not enough just to proclaim what is right, but sometimes you have to fight what is wrong. And they lived that out at great personal cost to save people's lives. And I think that is something that we can learn from, that society cares about our actions, God cares about our heart, and we have to reconcile both of those.
And I think that's a reason why people love the Fallout stories so much, the different campaigns that were done, because you end up having to build a reputation. You decide, okay, I'm going to help this faction, or I'm going to make these decisions that are morally ambiguous, like trying to figure out your walk and how to walk well in the game, and who to support and who to fight and what causes to get behind. It's very much reflects, I think, the Christian walk. I mean, obviously it's not a direct parallel, but you can definitely pull things out of it. And I think that's one thing that's really missing from Fallout 76 is a story like that, because that's been their consistency.
Yeah, I think if there's something we can learn from all of this, it's perception is reality, right? So living well, maintaining your integrity, and then also going back to something that you said earlier, that how we say yes and follow through, and if we say no, we follow through. Like it's all about integrity at this point. It's about being people whose word can be trusted, and that says a lot in a society full of people whose word can't really be trusted. They're ambiguous. They say maybe they'll go to a party because they're not going to go to the party, you know. But being open, being forthright and forthcoming, these are all things that we can learn. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Derrick, for joining me. Thank you for listening this week. I hope you have a great week, and we will see you next time.
From how you look or what they say, like a lion runs wild through the wilderness. From showing off a living faith, like the eagles flying high, dancing with me. Yeah. There's breath in your lungs.
There's breath in your lungs to
God, take
breathe.
this mask away.
You see, won't let you